I was wearing a hazmat suit. You could only have one visitor at a time.
Trauma really does a number on our bodies and our mental health.
It's okay to not be okay and to express that you're not okay.
The key to life is living with a heart full of gratitude.
Really about the power of women and the way that we take care of each other and how amazing we are when we tap into that.
Welcome to the Hot Flash Health Podcast, where we're dishing out unfiltered truths about menopause with a side of sass and a sprinkle of grass.
Get ready to dive into the wild world of hot flashes, mood swings, and all of the other joys of being a teenager.
This ain't your grandma's podcast. No, we are here to talk our bodies, our fears, our passions, our desires, all while navigating this wild roller coaster ride of menopause.
So grab a glass of wine,
For free.
kick back, relax, and let's enjoy this hot flash wave together.
I'm Courtney Mamusha, and alongside me is my fabulous co-host, Dawn Fable.
We're just two outspoken broads who like to call it how it is.
Now, without further ado, let's kick off today's episode.
It is such a beautiful day, and even more beautiful because we have the extraordinary Megan Oberle on this podcast. Someone who I've known for many years, I went to high school with, and she is just as beautiful now as she was back in the day. So Megan is such an empowering and inspiring and tear-jerking podcast. Megan is a woman whose story embodies such resilience and incredible strength and the power of turning pain into purpose. Megan's life took an unimaginable turn when she lost her husband to COVID, only to later endure a life-altering dirt bike accident that left her without her left eye. Yet, despite all of the grief and adversity, Megan, you have forged such a path of advocacy, of support, of empowerment and vulnerability for others facing similar struggles. So thank you. Throughout all of this life experience, Megan is working to provide financial aid, therapeutic resources, and a compassionate community for those who are navigating loss, whether it be physical or emotional. She is particularly passionate about helping the visually impaired secure prosthetic eyes and advocating for fair access to healthcare and insurance support. In this episode today at Hot Flash Health, we will explore Megan's journey, her battles with healthcare system, goodness knows we've all had those, and how she's found the strength to rebuild her life and help others do the same. We'll dive into how grief, how motherhood, she's a mother to a beautiful boy, and how middle-age awakenings have intersected her life and navigated into major life transitions. So today we celebrate Megan. Your message is clear. Loss can change your life, but healing is always possible with support, courage, and purpose-driven mission, which you've done so beautifully. So we're so happy to have you. I'm so honored to reconnect with you after all of these years. And gosh, let's dive in.
Well, it's an honor to be here. So thank you so much for having me on. And it's great to see you. And meet you, Courtney.
Yes. Yeah.
Before we start, Court, I have a joke because Courtney looks so cute today, by the way. She always looks super cute. But I saw this the other day. Show your blazer a tiny bit.
Okay. It's so cute. Okay.
Yeah.
And my cute jeans.
It goes something like this. What is a middle-aged woman wearing a blazer like that called?
What?
Duff what?
Oh. Pretty much it. I'm that cougar.
Did you come up with that on your own?
No, I wish I did.
She looked it up before we started.
That is so cute.
Well, thank you, Dawn. And it's so nice to meet you, Megan. And I know you guys go back to high school? And I was getting briefed a little bit of, your story, Megan, and it's so incredible. And I'm so excited to dive in. So why don't we just get started with, you really have had a background of unimaginable loss and incredible resilience. Let's take us all back to the moment of your life, or one moment that changed you and how you navigated those early days of grief and recovery. Because
Well, let's see. I should probably start with the loss of my husband. He passed away of COVID-19, June of 2021. And in those COVID, it was sort of towards the end of COVID, it felt like the vaccine was coming out. He had struggled with MS, but as far as we knew, MS shouldn't make COVID any worse. And then there were a lot of messages about people with autoimmune disorders and what the vaccine could do to them. He was planning to get it about 2 days after we were diagnosed, and we were diagnosed together on the same day. One of the things that it still sort of haunts me is I think that I gave it to him. I think I had COVID first. I hadn't been feeling well for a couple of days, but I went and got tested and it came back negative. And I remember I was sitting at the kitchen counter and I told him, I was like, well, my test came back negative. And he said, well, I can kiss you now. And I always, that moment kind of, sticks with me. And then a couple of days later, he wasn't feeling well. And he said, I think we should both go get tested and you should get tested again. And I remember thinking like, what? I'm negative. It's fine. And then we got those positive tests. So, it just kind of started out where we were both a little bit sick. Neither of us felt terrible. We quarantined and our son stayed home from school. Over the 2 weeks, it just seemed like I started to get better and he didn't. And he just had a cough that sort of persisted. He didn't really have a fever, but he just couldn't get rid of his cough. I was sort of the naggy wife, and I was getting all these different messages from people, pulling all my resources, like, what should I do to get him better? I was pumping him full of all these random vitamins. And a friend of mine who's a nurse was getting us prescriptions on the DL. And the cough just wasn't going away. So I basically forced him to go to the ER and they did a chest x-ray and released him. I remembered I'm never going to get him back there. And then over the next week, he just got really sick. Then he did start to have a fever. And now this is almost like in week 4, which was kind of bizarre. None of the stories were really fitting this that we had read about with anybody with COVID. And truthfully, we hadn't really known anybody that had gotten that sick at this point. Friends were getting vaccinated. People seemed to be going out and about a little bit more. Of course, we just didn't expect what happened to happen. About a week later, he was very sick at home. And I was just begging him, like, can I call 911? Can I get you back to the hospital? I was calling his friends saying, I'm having a tough time getting him back there. I had a variety of people on the case and he ended up driving himself to the hospital, checking himself in. A nurse called me and said, he's septic. He's very sick, but we think he's going to be fine. We're going to give him some fluids, give him some medication, and he should be fine. And over the course of that week, his lungs just weren't recovering. And so he just kept getting more and more sick and needing more oxygen to breathe. But they couldn't figure it out. They were sort of saying, we don't think he has COVID anymore. We have no idea what's happening. I got a call from one of the nurses. Well, early on, I got a call from a nurse that said he was trying to escape, which is so him. And I was actually going back through our text messages because he just was one of those people that did whatever the hell he wanted to do, always. And I was going back through the text messages and he was like, this is bullshit. My nurse was a bitch. I don't think they're helping me here. And there was me just like, just stay one more night. We just have to get you some fluids. They're saving your life, and at that time I was kind of having to sneak into the hospital. I was wearing a hazmat suit. You could only have one visitor at a time. And I remember at that point, he did say, will you bring in some shampoo and wash my hair? And I thought, oh gosh, this is seeming a little more serious than we thought. And then I got a phone call about a week later that said they were moving him to the ICU. And at the time I thought, this is good. He's going to get more one-on-one care and they're going to figure out what's going on. Because it still was like nobody could really figure it out. And then we were in the ICU for probably 2 weeks. Again, he just was really struggling to breathe. He would say it sounded like he was drowning. He was on all these breathing machines and just getting very, very weak. And if he got up to move or just like moving his hands, his oxygen would drop. So the ventilator was always on our minds. Of course, we were doing everything we could to avoid it at that point. I was able to get into the hospital every day and stay with him. And we had this amazing support of people, my friends and family that took care of Bo. And I could just be there for him. And, it's this COVID, so he didn't really have many visitors. I was like 1 or 2 people every 24 hours. And usually I wanted it to be me because I was the one that had, all the numbers and the oxygen levels. And I felt like I was kind of the one that was managing his case and was fighting for his life. I remember there was this night before he went on the ventilator where he gave me a foot massage, which was hard for him to move, which was very sweet. He knew that was my favorite thing. And he did that. And then I got a text message. I woke up to a text message the next morning that said something like, they're doing it, but don't feel, he knew I'd feel bad that I was asleep. And he was like, don't feel bad. I remember my son coming down the stairs, and I was crying, and he said, what's wrong? And I said, well, they put him on a ventilator. Got Bo to school. I rushed to the hospital, and he was like, you're basically in a coma, so there's no talking to him again at this point. And it's not like what you saw in the pictures, it's pretty gruesome, the whole scene. And he was at Littleton Hospital. Eventually, I think he was there about a week, and a nurse came in and said, look, we don't know what's going on with him. The doctors obviously don't know. And your best bet is to get him transferred to Anschutz. And by a course of miracles, because Anschutz wasn't in network and all of that stuff, but we were told at the end of that day, Flight for Life is coming, and we're going to transfer him over to Anschutz. And I do remember thinking, like, this is going to be a turning point, and they're going to figure it out. They did say he could lose his life in the transfer, but he made it, and we got there, and I felt a lot of hope. He ended up being there almost, I think, 6 weeks, moved to a variety of floors. At one point, they decided he had COVID, which, we had thought had been at that point ruled out, and they transferred him to the COVID floor, which is where I just feel like I saw unimaginable loss there. I saw doctors huddling outside of people's hospital doors, sort of giving them like their last moment. I think I was always the only visitor that I saw there. And maybe because people were afraid. Obviously not everyone was allowed, but people probably didn't want to catch COVID. But I think a lot of those people died alone. And at one point they extubated him. They thought he was getting better, and they took the ventilator off. And then 2 days later, he had something called ICU acquired weakness, where his whole body was shutting down. And I don't know if the MS had something to do with all this. It's really hard to say. I feel like there's still a lot of mystery around COVID, which I would love to explore some of this at some point. But he just couldn't even hold his head up or move his fingers or anything. During those couple of days, we did get to communicate, because he would sort of like nod. I'd use an alphabet board, and we'd spell out sentences through that and kind of nod with letters. And of course, it was always about Bo. How's Bo doing? How's baseball? He did ask to see Bo anytime he was awake, and Bo wasn't allowed in. Nobody under 18 was allowed in, like a killer. And he wanted to be outside, and those two things were just not allowed. I remember rushing back to the hospital one day and him saying, I think I have COVID again, because he'd been asleep. And I guess COVID to him was just not being able to breathe. And they intubated him and put him back on the ventilator. We tried to wean him off and put him on a trach. And for some reason that he never really recovered from that surgery. And there was just a lot of confusion in those last days, hearing messages that he was maybe going to be okay, and then messages that he wasn't. But it had been a long, 2 months in the hospital, in the ICU. And I remember I was starting to get calls in the middle of the night from the hospital. We think that he may not make it through the night, and this is it. So on the last day, we got him shaved, and they weaned him off enough sedation that he could sort of speak to me, and indicated, he knew it was coming to an end. We were able to get Bo in that day to say goodbye and at least see him one last time, but he was not awake for that. Made him kind of look like his old self, because he had looked a lot different, and to not scare Bo, but, got him shaved and kind of did his hair and put on some glasses, and had some close friends in, and his dad flew out, and they removed the ventilator. And then they had showed us a picture of his lungs, that it was like concrete was taking over his lungs, and they could no longer expand. They were being weighed down with these concrete blocks. And, he could never probably breathe again on his own or be awake, really. I think I was in shock. And I think for like those 2 months, I was living and breathing for him in the hospital. And I was kind of like, became a doctor. And I was kind of having a panic attack for 2 months, just like, we have to figure this out, and I have to save my son's life is really what or my son's dad's life is really what I was thinking the whole time. I just couldn't imagine life without him. So I think those days and weeks after, I think I was in shock. And I had an amazing support system, but I just couldn't really fathom what had happened. And I do believe that led to my accident. I think my nervous system was just all whacked out. And it was 4 or 5 months later, and I got into this accident and was testing out a dirt bike, and I hit a tree. It was like I was going like 2 miles an hour, and we think the handlebar went through my left eye. And it was a lot of pain. And then in a very weird way, things came full circle. I was rushed to the hospital. They flight for life me over to Anschutz to save my eye. Did an emergency surgery and couldn't. And then I was in triage there, which is exactly what I saw happen to him. And it was like I was laying on this table and I was like, gosh, I'm on the other side of this. When I got home, I had amazing friends and family and people taking care of me and my son around the clock. It really was like an amazing show of community, and I think really saved me. And in a way, those months when I was lying in bed, because I couldn't see and I was in quite a bit of pain. Your eyes are sympathetic. So when one eye goes, the other eye also can't open for a while and feels pain, which is something I learned. But also my right eye, that's the good eye, had been adjusted to only really see about 12 inches in front of my face. So without the left eye, I couldn't really see or get around, and I didn't drive. But my friends showed up and my cousins showed up and my parents, and I was kind of able to lie in bed and grieve everything for a couple of months, which I think in the end was kind of a good thing. There you have it.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
That was a lot. Sorry.
No, I think that, gosh, I have so much that I want to say. First and foremost, I can remember watching so closely and almost being obsessed with this journey of Bob and how you posted on Caring Bridge or whatever that you did. I was so immersed, Megan, in his recovery, as I think were thousands and thousands of people. And the way in which, you're someone that I always admired and I always respected, and we were never dear friends in high school, but you just have such a beautiful soul. And I think that what you went through, you never, at least from my perspective as an outsider who is following your journey, you never lost your sense of gratitude. And you never lost the optimism. And that is what rang so true to me as I followed along this journey with Bob and your eye and all of these things. So I so admire your strength and your vulnerability, but most importantly, your grateful heart. And you never left one of those posts or signed off without acknowledging that community that you had around you. And I think that we as women, especially as we age and get older, you recognize those people that you want to hold close to you. And I think that speaks volumes of the person that you are, that so many people rallied around you and your beautiful son. But I think that you handled such a horrific turn of events in such a graceful and beautiful and grateful way. I mean, for whatever it's worth, just having followed that as sort of an outsider. And, my mom always says the key to life is living with a heart full of gratitude. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that.
Oh, gosh. Well, that's beautiful. And thank you so much for those kind words.
I think it's really easy for us to go into a state of why me, and what Dawn said, people take things and negatively look at it like the world is against me and this is woe is me. And I've had my fair share of grief losing two parents. I also lost partial vision in my right eye when I was 19. So I have not anywhere near you, but I remember how hard it was for my eyes to readjust, and the headaches and the trauma that caused for months, a year or two. So I have nothing but sympathy, but I do echo Dawn in saying how hard it is to be optimistic and carry that message, and with everything that happened to you. So sorry to butt in, but I just wanted to also say, whew.
You know, anxiety, having struggled with generalized anxiety for as long as I can remember and it being so debilitating in my life, I've almost been a student of anxiety. And anxiety for so many of us is the lack of ability to control the outcome of the future. And I can only imagine what you were experiencing in those moments because you were unable to control the outcome. So it's almost like we grasp harder and we try to control more.
Yeah.
Because that's truly what anxiety is. So, girl,
It's
I
so true.
like,
Actually, what you're saying is so true. I really remember believing I could control. I was like, I think if I love him enough, this is sort of funny. I was like rubbing his feet with essential oils. And finally the doctors came in and they were like, you're screwing everything up with the ventilator. You've got to like back off. But I thought I had control. And I think that I was panicked and I was experiencing true anxiety for the first time in my life. And then that loss of control at the end, and maybe some peace with all of that. But yeah, it was truly out of control.
I just wanted to ask too, thinking about all this, and I know, there's so many of us women who don't have kids out there and so many of us that do, but I always wonder if putting somebody else in front of you really helps us get outside of our own narrative where, you were thinking about your son and like how he was going to perceive the situation. And I'm sure with what happened with your eye, instead of giving up, you're like, I have to be a mother. I have to be there for him. So maybe like talk a little bit about how, having those bright stars that you're looking towards instead of looking back really helped you.
100%. My son is the reason I was like, I want to keep going. And I did tell him the other night, I was like, I want to make you proud. Absolutely. There were days after I lost my eye where I was like, I don't think I'm ever getting out of bed again. I don't think I'm going to drive. I prefer not to leave my room. I might go downstairs, but like that's as far as I'm going to go. But really for my son, wanting to get to his activities, I wanted not only to be there physically, but to be able to take him and be an active mom. He was my motivation, my everything. I don't want to put that kind of pressure on him. You always read too much about how you should be as a mom, but he is my inspiration and my whole world, really. And thank God for him. So
he's your why, right?
He's my why. Yes.
Yeah.
He's a little trooper. He is a little fighter, so he's awesome.
And how, middle age is funny, right? And I think you experienced, in court, you too. My husband too, experienced tremendous loss at a younger age than typical people. And grief is such a funny thing. How is your son doing, foremost? And, for any parent or any person for that matter who has experienced some sort of loss of someone who's a close family member or friend of their children, what is your advice to people as to how to help children navigate through grief? I'm sure it's very different for everyone, but what have you found to be helpful in your lives? Because sadly, we're at the point where our parents are aging, right?
Yeah.
We're experiencing loss of grandparents. We're experiencing loss of friends our age. We're experiencing loss of parents, of our children's friends. I think that, it's a circle of life, but we are in the midst of a grief shit show.
A grief shit show. That is so true. And what I've experienced and what Bo's experienced, everyone's going to experience, right? But at different stages. This is kind of a complicated answer, but for Bo, I do think he kind of beats to his own drum. And he has been really resistant to therapy. I'm in all types of therapy, but he has not wanted to go. I did take him to a child therapist shortly after Bob had passed away. And he seemed to enjoy it, but he refused to go back, locked himself in a room. And I've talked to several therapists. They're like, don't force it, because this could be another trauma for him. But it's always on the table. Like, of course, it's just always an option. I continue to remind him if you ever need to talk to anybody. He's now in middle school. He was 9 when Bob passed away, and now he's 13. So I keep thinking, as these hormones hit, the grief shit show could come for him. So I alerted all the counselors at the school. And the principal just said, if you guys could keep an eye out, bring him in every once in a while, just act like you're chit-chatting, but don't be overt, don't be overt about it. And overall, he seems to be doing very well. But I don't want to be blind to the fact that this could change at any second for him. So I try to keep Bob's memory alive with him. And I send him, like, Bob, before when going on the ventilator, made a lot of videos for Bo. So we send those to him. I try to just bring him up in casual conversation. Good friends of Bob's are still in our lives and talk about him with Bo. So, that's my hope with him, but there is no like perfect answer. I know we looked into Judy's house, which I've heard great things about. Bo was just not up for it. So, there are these great resources out there, but we just, for him, haven't quite tapped into all of them.
Yeah. One thing that you mentioned this briefly when you were talking about Bob, but I'm sure you're like an insurance nightmares, like your insurance company's nightmare. And I know you've been really working hard to help people navigate through insurance. Don knows I just had heart surgery in October and I couldn't get it approved by insurance. It was like a disaster. Yeah. So I kind of feel a little bit about this, but I know, getting a prosthetic eye and dealing with everything you dealt with. Can you share a little bit about your experience and how you are helping others navigate this nasty road called insurance?
So I am in the midst of trying to figure all this out and figure out a way to help people. Ultimately, what I would like to do is I'd like universal health care and to do away with insurance altogether. After Bob passed away, we got a bill from the hospital that was $1.1 million. Through time and other angels out there, that got resolved. My eye and my eye surgeries, because we were on Bob's insurance, now I go through the marketplace and my insurance changes every year, but I've had so many crazy things happen over my eye surgeries not being covered to my last prosthetic eye not being covered. My son also has had some health issues that we're fighting insurance with right now. So ultimately, my goal, I really just want to provide prosthetic eyes for people. And I would love for them not to have to fight for them. It was such a light at the end of the tunnel for me. I kind of felt like, when I get my eye, I can start living again and I can be out in the world. It was sort of interesting being out in the world, with this like gaping hole in my face and the looks that I would get, and which is a whole nother topic. But I had gone through a bunch of surgeries. That whole area atrophies when you lose an eye, like the muscles stop really working. So I've had a lot of reconstructive surgeries over there and I needed a new eye, and insurance just wasn't going to cover it. My ocularists, who are these artists that make the eyes, his office had been fighting my insurance for me, and they called around Christmas time last year and said, we've been fighting and fighting, you're not going to get it. And they gifted me this eye, and the eyes are like $5,000 to $6,000. So, and I'm on all these support groups online. All these people are like, my eye isn't being covered. How are you guys getting your eyes? I just think there's a need out there. And first goal is to start to provide people with prosthetic eyes. And then I am not sure how I want to completely take on healthcare and insurance, but that is another one of my goals. It's a mess. It's really all I can say about it. It's a mess.
What's so beautiful though, and Courtney mentioned this before, is there's so many of us that live in our victim cycles, right? Why me? Why me? Why me? You have done such a beautiful job of turning pain into purpose, going out there and advocating for other people who need a prosthetic eye, who trying to figure out a way to navigate through these insurance nightmares. I know that you are soon to release In the Blink, which is a podcast, and will no doubt be such a powerful initiative. I guess my question in all of that is, in experiencing the emotional and mental and long healing journey, what is your perspective of all of this on the other side? How have you turned how have you turned trauma into purpose? And how do you continue to operate with such a grateful heart? Like what do you believe happened on the other side for you, because I know what I see is so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think there have been a lot of gifts on the other side of this. And, and I would, to be honest with you, at times I'm still struggling with this loss. And of course, the loss of Bob. And I thought by turning my pain into purpose, that's like also part of the healing of it all. Just the way that this has changed my life, how active I am, my comfortability in different situations. I hate things coming at my face. I'm now very sensitive to noise. I get disoriented more easily. I get headaches. So at times, if I'm being honest, I'm not always like, everything's wonderful. I have moments.
You're not shitting rainbows. I mean,
I'm not shitting rainbows. I'm sometimes like, this fucking sucks. There were some amazing blessings. And one, I remember talking to my brother about this, and he said, not everybody has experienced the power of community the way that you have. And so one of the first blessings was the way that people showed up. And I had women sleeping in bed with me, friends that did medication charts for me, literally putting eye drops in my eye. I had rides to every doctor's appointment. Bo had dinner, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. He was taken to all of his activities. And that overwhelming feeling of love was so powerful and healing. And that truly changed my life. And I think it also put so much in perspective of the things that I used to worry about that I just don't let bother me anymore, because I think I saw, now it was almost like I want to live every single day to the fullest. And the beauty of sight, now realizing how beautiful everything I see is and how you could lose that, in a blink. I also, this is going to sound a little, I don't know, nutty, but I couldn't get out of bed. So I started meditating, and I really leaned into that. Friends would come over and I was like, I can't hang, I'm in too much pain. And so they'd lay in bed with me and I'd put on a meditation. And so I started meditating a lot, which I felt to be really healing as well. And I went back to teaching, and I've been teaching mindfulness to kids. And I think that's really been a healing experience too, to kind of talk to them about, I get it. I get that sometimes life is tough and it's not easy. So the kids honestly have inspired me also.
How lucky to be a kid in that classroom, right?
Oh.
And I think, I think we as women have a really difficult time of saying yes or accepting, right? Because we want to do it all on our own, and we can do it all. And I think that there's something so beautiful in the act of women just saying yes to people wanting to give to them.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to bring up, which I don't think women hear enough because we are used to taking care of everybody, is that trauma really does a number on our bodies and our mental health. I've had, and I still have, again, like I have days where it's hard, and I talk to Dawn, like I don't want to get out of bed today because your central nervous system shuts down. And it's way easier to like turn on Netflix and lay under the covers than get up and face the world. And I think that I just want to say it's okay for anyone listening out there to have these feelings and honor these feelings. And like a lot of us like want to get out of this shit. And like I'm crying because I feel the same way. Like we're in this mode of like it's what Emily Jacobson talked about this. Like we're froze. We're frozen. It's not fight or flight. It's like we're froze. We can't do anything. And I just want to like talk to that, and maybe you can add a couple words that it's okay. I mean, emotions are a roller coaster. We've got our hormones up and down right now. I didn't even have any idea that it could be hormonal, that I was like, I hate my husband. I don't want to get out of bed. Everybody's driving me crazy, but it's fucking hard. And loss and trauma and grief are a fickle bitch. And I just want to give my empathy for all the women listening, and Megan, like give you kudos for getting out of bed and finding purpose.
Thank you. And yes, I 100% agree with you and feel that. And there were days I was also getting crushing anxiety after my accident. And who knows, I had been on, all these pain meds and everything else. And I didn't even want to walk down the street, and I was disoriented, and the way I looked and everything. So I so feel that and understand that. One of the things I've learned in the class I'm teaching, because I teach mindfulness, is feel your feelings. And I think it's just so important, like what you just said. It's okay to not be okay and to express that you're not okay and to work through all that. It's much better to do that than to be like, everything's fine, which I think was my previous MO. So that's like another blessing. Like I couldn't do that anymore. I was like, no, this is awful. So I think that's so true. And getting help. I have an awesome trauma therapist that I talk to a lot about all of this. And I think that's been really, really helpful. And friends are amazing too. But, sometimes they've got their own shit.
We all have our own shit, right? I mean, I think that's what's so beautiful is, women have stopped being bitches and are lifting one another up, right? And empowering and sharing their vulnerabilities, and having these discussions that may or not be in your comfort zone and making you feel uncomfortable. And for that, I'm so grateful for, my friendship with Courtney and Megan, for you, being on this podcast and opening up these really important topics, because it's something that we're all going to experience in the form of grief, right?
Yes.
So
I want to point something out. I've got this necklace on. It's all tangled, but it's an elephant. Do you guys know the story of the elephant?
I think
I love
do,
elephants.
but no,
They're like magical creatures.
They're magical and you're going to love them even more. I wish I used to have the little saying next to me, but when Bob was in the hospital, some women that I wasn't even close friends with, this is like how amazing everybody was. Had conversations time to time, dropped an elephant necklace off at my house with a story about the elephant. And it said, when a female elephant is sick or struggling, all the other female elephants surround her until she comes back to life. They nourish her, they take care of her. And then when she's fully back on her feet, they release that female elephant back out into the wild. And that's truly how I felt with my girlfriends. And so the symbol of the elephant to me now is really about the power of women and the way that we take care of each other and how amazing we are when we tap into that versus, like you hear the narrative of like women being bitches and tearing each other down. It's like, oh my gosh. I mean, men are great, but women are phenomenal.
Yeah.
We should rule the world for sure.
We should rule the world.
We should.
One day, damn it.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm blessed to know a lot of those important female figures in your life, and they are extraordinary. But it doesn't go without saying that the people who we support are extraordinary as well. I'd like to say that there wouldn't be that band of women ensuring that, you're doing okay unless you were the extraordinary woman that you are. So there's looking ahead for you and your mission and your legacy and your personal life and your motherhood. Something that I want to talk about a little bit is you have been blessed to find love for the second time.
Yes.
And for many people who have lost their spouses or partners or whatever, that seems like uncharted territory and so daunting and all of it. And what a lucky man he is to have found you. But for those who have experienced loss and are looking for love or feeling hopeless and that they'll find love again, can you share a little bit of your story around that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I feel like if you have loved before, you'll love again. I think you'll find it. We have a crazy story for it, but it was actually his backyard that I was in when I got in the dirt bike accident. And he lived down the street from me, had lost his wife about 4 years prior. And I had known his wife. We were friendly, and I didn't know him that well, although we kind of hung out in the same group of friends, always admired him and them, but just hadn't really spent much time. Then COVID hit, I just hadn't really seen him very much. But so I was in his backyard and he took me to the hospital. And at first we were just friends. Like he would come by and sort of check on me. And then he started taking me to doctor's appointments. He will say it was like a gauntlet to get through to get to see me because my girlfriends had a schedule. He was like, how do I get on the sign-up genius?
He's like disguising himself as Joanne.
Like a wig,
Big deal.
but they were fiercely protective, like
Women
elephants.
are fucking feisty and I love it.
But
Like, I
totally.
mean, don't fuck with our girl. Like, unless you're going to show up in the best way possible, like, no, thank you.
Don't even try. They were definitely doing that. So just over time, we were friends. And then I would say that's kind of why it worked. It didn't come on like fast and furious. It was a friendship that then developed into more. And I think, of course, we understood a lot of the same things because we had both lost a spouse, but also through all of that, like, because he'd just come by and hang out, I think. And I was like, I can't be anybody other than myself right now because I'm in such a crazy state that we just sort of grew very, very close on this, kind of soul level. I did go and see a medium before he and I
I
started dating.
love mediums.
Okay. And she knew like nothing about me. Definitely talked to Bob. And
Was it
I was,
Sarita on 6th?
no,
Oh, Court, we got to go there.
I forget what
Megs,
this was.
you can
Yes,
lead
please.
us.
But anyways, it felt like ordained by Bob and his late wife, Ellen. She nailed Bob, was like, I'm picturing this guy and he's taking out his IVs. I was like, yes, that would be Bob. And there's like no way she would have known that. And it was all love. She was just like, he just wants you to know how much he loves you and wants you to be happy. And then she said the craziest thing. And she was like, there's a woman named Ellen with him, which was Johnny's late wife. And it just felt like they were sort of like blessing the whole thing as well. It was really, I'm not sure if this is for everyone, but it really felt like it was sort of this soul connection for everybody that was sort of meant to be. And
Like a blessing of you to move forward and, create a
yeah,
beautiful life together, knowing that it's okay. And those, Bo's dad and your spouses, were saying, hey, it's okay.
yeah, it was really
You
nice.
And thank you for sharing that. I'm so happy for you and what a lucky guy.
And his name is my husband's name, right? Johnny. Mine's John. So, hey, we're not
Yeah.
all bad.
I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but Bob, going back to Bob, he worked at the Infinity dealership for a long time, right? He was the general
Yes,
manager.
yes.
And I'll never forget, you put me in touch with him
Oh,
because
I
I was
did.
I was going to buy
I
an
don't even remember.
Infinity. And I remember just falling in love with that guy at first sight. I mean, from a, personality standpoint, he took me up into the hills of somewhere and he was like, drive this bad boy like a bitch. He was like, going to make me break every rule and every speed limit and everything possible. So when you say, when you share that story of him ripping out the IV, it's like, in my short experience in time meeting Bob, I can see that about him.
I love that so much. We have a bench in the neighborhood dedicated to him that says drive fast and take chances,
Oh, I love
which
that.
at the end of the night when you would say goodnight to people that would leave our house and say like drive safely, he would always say
Drive fast.
drive fast and take chances. It was like, oh. But I love that you got to experience that with him, and that was his true love too, were cars and driving fast. And he didn't really play by the rules ever. So
Good for him. Good
yeah.
for him. Gosh, Megs. Next chapter. You are doing so many exciting things. You're launching a podcast, hoping to start a nonprofit. Tell the world, shout from the rooftops. And Hot Flash Health has, small rooftops currently, but we're hoping to make that larger.
It'll get bigger and bigger. More and more people.
I love that
Tell,
so much. Also,
tell
by the
people.
way, I'm in menopause, so I don't know if, I was like, I fit right in on Hot Flash Health.
Who isn't?
Yeah, it's an interesting roller coaster. There's ups and downs and everything in between, but menopause is certainly having its moment right now. But where Courtney and I and Hot Flash Health are really hoping to come in is open up conversations that are uncomfortable and create vulnerability and sort of normalize what we as women are going through. Add a little bit of laughter and sense of humor to it all. Almost like we're having discussions with girlfriends, like we're sitting around the table with, drinking copious amounts of wine as to why our vaginas are dry or why we're, hate our husbands or why, we're plucking our chin hairs in the middle of the night or all of those things. So,
I love that. I
yeah.
love that. Well,
so tell us what's next and how we can support you.
So I am in the process of starting In the Blink, which I think it's going to start. I'm going to get a fiscal sponsorship from an already existing nonprofit so I can keep overhead very low and just use all the money to raise money to get people prosthetic eyes. That's really my first goal. That will be called In the Blink. My website's going to be rolled out in a couple weeks, which will hopefully have more information. In the Blink will be my website, and then the podcast, In the Blink podcast. So all of this is coming hopefully the next 2 to 3 weeks, and it's been a really exciting and healing journey to go through all of this. So I'm honored to be on here, and thank you so much for supporting my cause. And I do think making the process easier for people to get prosthetic eyes just would be an amazing thing to put out into the world, because at the end of the day, you've gone through so much. It's like that should not be a struggle to get your eye.
I agree. Well, we are cheering you on here and in the background and whatever we can do here at Hot Flash Health to help you get eyeballs into everybody who needs them.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, of course. And thank you for joining us. I want to share one last thing, because you were such a inspiring and empowering guest around grief. And I recently found this. I sent to a colleague of mine who lost someone very important in him. And you exude all of this. It says, grief. I had my own notion of grief. I thought it was a sad time. That followed the death of someone you love, and you had to push through it to get to the other side. But I'm learning there is no other side. There is no pushing through. But rather, there is absorption, adjustment, and acceptance. Grief is not something that you complete, but rather you endure. Grief is not a task to finish and move on, but an element of yourself, an alteration of your being, a new way of seeing, a new definition of self.
That is so true.
Beautiful.
So for you, my beautiful friends, you included, you have done a beautiful as you can way of grieving and sharing your vulnerabilities and reinventing yourself in turning purpose and passion and all of the things in such a graceful way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we can't wait to have you on again, Megan. I mean, honestly.
Let's chit chat some more and have wine next time.
Well, we're into, we always try to have some cocktails on a Friday afternoon.
The Friday afternoon club.
Yeah, it didn't feel like the appropriate time to, pop open champagne and do shots, but
tequila. It's more like tequila.
that, want to do anything that we can to support, to empower, to promote, to just share your story with the world. I hope that you get like a book deal. I hope you get a movie deal. I hope you get hundreds and millions of dollars to give people eyes. I hope that you take over the fucking world.
Oh, I love you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Until we talk again, have an amazing weekend, and whatever we can do to help you, we're here.
You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah.
Bye.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. Remember, menopause may be a wild ride, but together we've got this.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Hot Flash Health.
Stream and subscribe to us on any of your favorite listening platforms like YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
And of course, share your thoughts with us. We love hearing from our amazing listeners.
And until next time, stay sassy, stay fabulous, and keep those hot flashes in check.
Yeah, girl.
Woo!